Evening, this is Phil Dixon coming with another edition of This Day in African American Baseball History. Of course, this is the November 15th edition, November 15th, 2025 edition. Let me be more specific on that. And in case you've never joined me before, you don't know what I do, you say, what am I listening to? Well, I'm a baseball historian, and typically I come on with events that happen in this day in African American baseball history. It could be called This Day in Black Baseball History if I want to term it that. And what I do is give you some events, and then right behind those events, I give you some commentary related to some of the things I know that might be different than some of the information's out there. So let's jump right into it. This is my second broadcast of the day. If you want to see something interesting, be sure and go back and look at the Charles Folis and the who was I did Julian Bell. Yep, Julian Bell broadcast that I did earlier today. It's a lot of unique information in that. Mr. Bell was somebody. Now this is not Papa Bell. This is another guy that I knew very well, and he was quite supportive of my work. And as a favor for him, I'm keeping his memory alive as well. Julian Bell. All right. Okay, so let's go until immediately. Let's get to work. Okay, so today is Saturday, November 15th. So let's go start with a Saturday, November 15th, 1913. Okay, men from Chicago with the Appomattox Club connections incorporated the Colored Negro Baseball Leagues of the United States of America in South Dakota. Okay, that's interesting. They came from Chicago, they went to South Dakota. Why did they go there? Because South Dakota has a different tax structure than they had in Illinois. So they went there to incorporate, and they did the incorporation. And the people there who signed that original incorporation were Frank L. Hamilton, George W. Holt, Holt, Julius F. Taylor, and Walter H. Farmer, and William R. Cowan, Cowan, and they were the directors of that new organization. Now, interesting, we don't know many of these guys. I did do a search on all of their names, a newspaper search, and the Appomattox Club was a quite influential club in Chicago. And in those years, actually, there was another guy, Beauregard Mosley, who was a big stockholder in the Leland Giants, and he was the one who actually funded Ruth Foster's Leland Giants that he had in 1910, a really great team. That was Beauregard Mosley. And Beauregard Mosley was a member of the Appomattox Club. So I don't know if this had much to do with him, but he didn't have him as an officer. But yeah, he was quite influential. So if you've never heard of Beauregard Mosley, that's someone you might want to know about. He ended up passing away during the first epidemic they had in 1919. So he never got to the 1920 when they finally organized a Negro National League. So long story short, we don't know these men because their venture wasn't successful. However, we do know the other men, and we celebrate those men, and that's in 1920, and their venture was successful. See how easily history can be changed? It's amazing. All right, let's go to another one. This is going to be November 15th, 1925, and we're going to put in a blue baseball here out on the California Winter League area there. So behind Wilbur Bullet Rogan's 3-hit pitching, the Philadelphia Royal Giants defeated Joe Peroni's All-Stars in a 7-5 win at Los Angeles White Sox Park. Biz Mackey slugged a home run. Crush Holloway, Rap Dixon, and George Carr hit doubles. All right. I've talked about some of these people. I've talked about Holloway recently. Rap Dixon, talked about him. Rap Dixon out of Stilton, Pennsylvania. I did interview his brother, Paul. So talked about them. Of course, Bullet Rogan is from my hometown. He wasn't born in my hometown. He was born in Oklahoma, but he grew up in Kansas City, Kansas. That's where I was. And so I have a really successful book that I've written on Wilbur Bullet Rogan, in case you ever want to read that book. It's called Wilbur Bullet Rogan and the Kansas City Monarchs. What I haven't talked much about is George Carr. Now, George Carr, he was the premier Kansas City Slugger. So when the Monarchs started in 1920, and they had a pretty good team, but George Carr is the guy that, as far as slugging, really put them on the map during that period. Now, you got to think about it. He's not in the Hall of Fame, but, they had Jose Mendez, who's a member of Cooperstown, Bullet Rogan, who's a member of Cooperstown, Walter Dobie Moore. Had he played a little bit longer, this dude could have walked in Cooperstown and been one of the all-time greats. He was on that team. And so George Carr comes to the Kansas City Monarchs. Actually, they picked up two people from Los Angeles. The first one, his name was Edgar Washington. If you probably ever heard of Edgar Washington ended up being better known as an actor. And of course, he's the father of Kenny Washington, who was one of the early blacks to integrate the NFL. But he played for them in 1920. And then George Carr also came from Los Angeles, and George Carr played with the Monarchs too. Now, George could play not only first base, but he played other positions as well. But he was a power hitter, and he was the one that was the leading hitting home run hitter out of Association Park. And so he played with the Monarchs, and he ended up leaving Kansas City and then going to join Hilldale in the Eastern Color League. So that's George Carr. Now, interesting thing about George Carr, if you go online, I was looking at some stuff, in the Society of American Baseball Researchers, SABR, they wrote a bio on him, and they talked about that he had passed away in McPherson, Kansas. Now, when you come into Kansas, you're in my territory. I'm a member of the Kansas actually, Kansas Humanities. I've been a member of them for 8 years, speak all over Kansas, and I'm presenting all the time. So I get a chance to go to some of these places, and I always try to seek out interesting information. George Carr, they gave him his death place is McPherson, Kansas. Now, he wasn't from McPherson. He was from Los Angeles. So how did he pass away in McPherson? Well, first of all, George ended up, and his baseball career is over, 1940s. He's a cook on the railroad. So he's on the train, working on the train. So if you passed away on the train, where they took you off is where they designated is the place you died. A good example of that is Fats Waller. You probably heard Fats Waller ain't misbehaving, that was one of his famous songs, Your Feet's Too Big. We can go on and on and on. Tremendous artist from the jazz period, stride piano player. He died on the train. And the next stop was Kansas City. They took him off in Kansas City, even though he lived in New York on the East Coast, because he was on the train. When they took him off in Kansas City becomes now the place where he died. But he really died on the train. And the same could be said for George Carr. So that's why McPherson, Kansas is his death place. Of course, he's buried in Los Angeles. All right, so I hope that makes a little sense. But this guy was a tremendous player, and he left, he left Kansas City and then went to Hilldale and tore the ball up there. He hit for power, he could steal bases, and could play multiple positions. George Carr, a name that we're not talking enough about. Man, if I don't say this every night, I almost feel like a broken record. It's talking about these people that we're not talking about. And there are lots of people, if you go online, they'll talk about certain teams, certain players, but they don't reach deep and then get the real rich history of what was going on in African-American baseball. Yeah. So anyway, there's George Carr. Next time I talk about George Carr, I'll tell you about the time that he won a horse for hitting home run. I'll save that one for later on. All right. Okay. So let's go to two more. We'll do two more. This is my second time on today. So this is November 15, 1931. Leroy Satchel Paige struck out 13 of Joe Perrone's All-Stars. Joe Perrone had a team, and he was kind of like the most important organizer on the West Coast having to do with Winter League baseball. So his name and his teams come up often. He always had connections. He'd get guys from the American National League to come out there. He'd give a special day. I have a picture somewhere in my collection where Tony Lazzori has a special day, and he's playing against the quote Philadelphia Royal Giants, who were pretty much the powerful African American team in Winter League baseball that year. Featured people like Andy Cooper and Frank Duncan was there, T.J. Young, of course, Newt Allen, Newt Joseph, and Billy Rogan. So anyway, you're going to get Joe Perrone a lot, all right? And the other team you're going to get is the White Kings, who were sponsored by a soap company. And I remember talking to Beatrice Garner, who was Newt Joseph's widow, and she used to tell me he would come back from Los Angeles, or either he would send ahead a lot of soap, and because they would evidently give him soap for playing these games, and they would send it back home. All right. So anyway, yeah, the Leroy Satchel Paige struck out 13 of Joe Perrone's All-Stars, but lost 8-5, and game was played at White Sox Park in Los Angeles. So that White Sox Park. If you ever want to see my book, The Negro Baseball Leagues of Photographic History, if you ever are able to get a copy, or if you own a copy already, I have images that take every angle of that park, and those images came from the Wilbur Bullet Rogan collection, and I was able to put that together so we can really see what that park looked like. So anyway, Satchel Paige, man, I could go on and on about Satchel Paige. I will say this. If you want to know about black baseball, go and get a book on Satchel Paige. Satchel Paige has more books written about him than any other African-American baseball player from the Negro Leagues. All right? So, but Satchel Paige, I'm a member of the Satchel Paige Foundation, so I talk to his family members often, and I'm always looking for new stories and personal things that you wouldn't know about. I will tell you one of them. Satchel Paige had a large house, and he and Lahoma would be gone quite a bit. So sometime they would need somebody to watch their kids, because he and Lahoma had 5, 6 kids or something like that. So there was a guy, he played for the Sioux City Ghosts. He was married to Lahoma's sister. And for a time, they lived in the house on the upper floor. And so whenever Satchel Lahoma would go somewhere, Satchel was getting recognition, they were right there in the house, and so they could watch the family. Now, this guy, I'm trying to think of his name. He played for the Sioux City Ghosts baseball team and softball team, and also he played basketball for the Sioux City Ghosts. And I interviewed him, and I couldn't remember. Look, I'm drawing a blank on his name today. But when I talked to Linda, I said, "Who was the guy that was married to Lahoma's sister that I interviewed?" And of course, she told me the name. But yeah. And that was great history, because he was up in the upper Midwest. So he was able to tell me about things happening around North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, because that was the territory he played in. But so he was an athlete, and he was Satchel Paige's brother-in-law, married to Lahoma's sister. All right. Okay, so let's go one more. November 15th, 1931. Now, the team out in Los Angeles, the baseball team that Satchel Paige is playing for, is the team sponsored by a guy named Tom Wilson. But Tom Wilson was simultaneously running a football team in Nashville. And the football team was called the Nashville Elite Giants. All right. Now I threw that out there. I want to correct you. People want to say Elite, but it's not Elite. And the reason I have to do that is because if I just let it go past, then people never get it correct. It's Nashville Elite Giants. But there are a lot of people saying Nashville Elite. What is an Elite? Tell me what an Elite is. But I tell you what, if I would say somebody's elite, you know what that means. And that's what Tom Wilson had in mind, Nashville Elite. but some people can't pronounce the word, and so they think it's elite, but no, it's elite. All right. So you will hear me a lot of times. I'll say elite, and I do this purposely because I'm gonna come right back and tell you that it's elite. All right. Okay. We're gonna make sure we get that correct. Nashville Elite. So the Nashville Elite professional football team defeated the Chattanooga Wolverines in a well-played 13-7 win. Wild Bill Wright of the Elites backfield featured in that game. And then on the other side of the ball, they had Jumpin' Joe Wiggins, who played for the Wolverines, and he was quite the running back too. So you have two guys, Wild Bill Wright, who's a superb baseball player, and played with Nashville, and then you have he played for Baltimore too when they went to Baltimore, but it's still Tom Wilson's team, the Nashville Elites. And then you also have Jumpin' Joe Wiggins, who had gone to Fisk University, outstanding football player, and he also broke in with the Nashville Elites. So these guys were multi-talented, and this is history that we don't talk about. This is history I should have known when I was coming up. Growing up, I would read books and stuff. Man, you could read about Elroy Hurst and stuff like that. Of course, you could read about who am I going to say? Jim Thorpe. Jim Thorpe. Read about those movies. You would see movies, but we never heard about any of these guys. And I'm so proud that over the last 45 years, I've done my part in trying to change how we talk about American history in sports. All right. So that guy's kind of does it for me. Let's see. I'm going to say hello to a few people. Guys, this is a short broadcast tonight. I used to try to keep it down about 20 minutes because I understand people are busy with life. So if you join me for 1 minute, 5 minutes, or if you stayed the entire broadcast, guys, I love you. I appreciate all your support. If you really enjoy what I'm doing, go ahead and subscribe, and let's keep this growing. Let's keep this growing. More people need to know about this, and the more people subscribe, the more it gets shared. So I appreciate that. So sometimes people put their names in here, and they have unique names. I can't actually figure out what the name is. If you need to do a phonic spelling of the name, phonics filling of the name, then sometimes that would help, especially if you're a foreign country, and I'm not real good with that. But I see some people here from foreign country, they say hello. Somebody spells the name Kamilskyy, says hello there, appreciate you coming in. And then somebody said, do you think we should have integrated? Of course we should have integrated. I don't think we ever should have been segregated, right? The best baseball players should have been playing in the best league in the world. That did not happen. That's why you don't always hear me call the American and National League the Major League. You'll hear me specifically say American and National League because they weren't always the Major League. They weren't always the best league. I don't care how you put it. So I just want to let you know that, yeah, we should have never been segregated. And not only in baseball, in the whole American culture. All right, somebody says, you have an elite ball knowledge. Well, thank you very much. I've been sitting around with this subject for a number of years, so I've met a lot of people and had some interesting times. The last example I gave was the Nashville Elites. And of course, I had a chance to meet Wild Bill Wright. He wasn't so wild. He was pretty tame when I met him. He was an older guy. And actually, I met him, I think it was in Baltimore, if I'm correct. He had moved away and lived in Mexico for a while. And there was a number of Negro Leaguers who went to Mexico and never came back. And so I'm always happy to talk about them. The other day I was on the telephone, and I said, I need to talk about this guy because I was talking to his granddaughter. And this is a guy by the name of Eddie Locke. Eddie Locke, Locke. And I'm going to do a special thing on Eddie at some point because Eddie was a tremendous pitcher. Won over 200 games. Nobody's talking about this guy at all. and he was a superb player, Eddie Locke. And once again, a lot of the people I'm talking about, many of them, when you go online and say maybe you search, if you even want to talk to AI, you're not going to get nearly the information I'm giving you here. All right. So thank you guys for joining me. We still got a little sunlight here in Kansas City, so I'm gonna go take a quick walk, and then I'll come and watch a little football tonight. And hey, this is the winter, so there's not any baseball unless you want to go watch some more replays, and you can turn on the baseball network, with that, which I do have. But you're gonna either get some old replays of games, some highlights, that kind of thing. But if you want to talk baseball and have a warm conversation, what they used to call the hot stove league conversation, come on back, guys. And at some point, I'm going to do a broadcast where if I get enough people here, where you can come in and ask me questions. And then what I will do is, without reading, I'll just fire back the answer, and I'll keep it brief. And then we'll do a 20, 30 minute, we'll do an hour if that's what you want to do. It just depends on what kind of questions we get and how many people join. So, all right. So, guys, thank you. And I'm out of here about 22 minutes. And I appreciate your support. And I'll be back tomorrow with the November 16th edition of This Day in Black Baseball History. And I'm looking at some of the things I have down here, man. Oh, man, there's some good stuff again. Oh, yeah. So I'm excited about tomorrow myself. So thank you, guys. And if you like what I'm doing, go ahead and subscribe, and we'll keep this conversation going for as long as you want it. Have a nice day.